Weather wagers back in full swing. The NFL playoffs. We survived Super Wild Card Weekend.
Did we?
No.
Did our record survive? I was going to say it's some ugly stuff out there when you're
stink.
picking against the spread.
We stink.
But let's give ourselves a little bit of credit here. Most of what we said
we have
transpired.
To because nobody else will.
Yeah, nobody else will. But most of what we said did in fact transpire.
Yes,
and
did.
I'm talking about the pretenders that were the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
How about
we knew that? How about the Jacksonville Jaguars?
The Jacksonville Jaguars were to me, the biggest story of the weekend with their historic comeback.
Just incredible. We're going to get into all of that. Plus, we've got the divisional round. The Eagles are back this week. The Chiefs are back this week.
They're all back.
We've got a lot of fun things to talk about. But first, we want to rewind the clock a little bit and talk some Penn State football. And one of the things that, everybody is buzzing about is, we have a lot of returning talent coming back next season, Dan. We, of course, had the big Rose Bowl victory, and our sports director here at ABC 27 got to go there and see firsthand how the team was put together to be able to win that game.
Yeah, so let's roll that interview now, and I think there's some exciting stuff to come with Penn State football.
Allie Berube from ABC 27 stopped by, and let's cue it up. We're thrilled today to be joined by our wonderful sports director, Miss Allie Berube, and we wanted to have her on, Dan, because, of course, we want to talk about Penn State football.
Well, and of course, we're jealous that she got to be out in sunny, well, maybe not so sunny, California. We'll get into that in a moment, but you got to experience the Rose Bowl, Allie.
It was one of those things that you think it's never possible to get to go to a Rose Bowl. We decided to make the trip here at the station, and I can't really compare it to any other sporting event. It's so unique. It's so historic. I think some people were trying to say, look, the Rose Bowl Stadium's just like Beaver Stadium. They're different. They're very different. But it was an experience unlike any other.
We're going to get into all of that, but let's back up and just talk about the season that Penn State had from your eyes. Sum it up for us, what you saw. You were covering this the whole step of the way from the sports angle. Talk about it. 11 wins.
11 wins. Kind of shocking, I think, if you were to sit in our seats, maybe even this time last year, coming off of a pretty terrible 2021 end, right? Of course, only winning 2 games of their last, 7, 8, 9 games.
Right.
So I think for a lot of fans, and I'm not a fan, but I was someone who was a little bit more pessimistic about how this season was going to go. I thought 8 wins, you should be thrilled with 8 wins. And as they started stacking some of those games that I thought were tricky, even, as simple as the first game against Purdue, and you're sitting there like, oh, wait, that's a different level we haven't necessarily seen. I know there was some pessimism about Sean Clifford coming back, kind of some surprise about him deciding to go for a 6th year. And so if you sit there and you think everything they overcame, of course, you lose to Michigan, you lose to Ohio State, and that's a bummer. To put together 11 wins, especially in the Rose Bowl against a very talented Utah team. Of course, we'll talk about it. They were down a couple key players there. But 11 wins, you should be thrilled with that. There's only a handful of times that's happened in program history. So to sit here and say, this team coming off of 2021 won 11 games, you got to be happy with that on some level.
Oh, I'm definitely happy as a Penn State fan. as an alum.
And they basically won every other game, or
Yes.
the games that they won in big fashion.
Yep.
And the games that they lost, they were competitive in the Ohio State game, not so much in the Michigan game. But you're right. I think everybody should be happy with that. And then we'll get into maybe what that means going forward. But let's go back to the Rose Bowl game, because you were there. And so this podcast, we do talk about the weather,
Yes.
and we knew the weather was not going to be great. California's had quite a couple of months, and you envision that scene with the San Gabriel Mountains and the sunset, and of course Penn State had to mess that up and bring central Pennsylvania weather with them.
It's what it looked like on
So
TV.
start there. We have to get you to talk about the weather. What was it like out there when you were there?
Yeah, so we landed on Wednesday, so almost 5-6 days before the game, and we head straight to Disneyland.
Yeah.
Perfect, right? Literally
Perfect.
got off an airplane, went to Disneyland, and it was gorgeous. It was like 70 degrees, a nice breeze, sunny, gorgeous, perfect. And I was like, heck yeah, it's December at the time.
Yep.
I was like, this is going to be an amazing week. The very next day, we head out to Thousand Oaks to go to the LA Rams practice. And it's like overcast, kind of chilly, but not terrible, not that big of a deal. It had rained overnight. And we're about to do our live shots, which 6 o'clock here, 3 o'clock there, and it downpours. Oh. And it poured the rest of the week. It poured that day, it poured Friday, it poured Saturday. Sunday, stunning, gorgeous, back to that 70-degree weather. The beginning of Monday, game day, was gorgeous as well. low humidity, the whole, like what you're sold when you say you're going to Southern
Right.
California. And we had to watch the game from the press box, not allowed to shoot it, broadcast rights, whatever. With 5 minutes to go in the game, you're allowed to go down to the field to get ready for post-game celebration. So we're walking down, and all of a sudden I'm like, it's raining. It's raining. It was calm the whole game. It was actually kind of chilly that day, but it was calm for the game. And the last 7, 8, 9 minutes of the game, it just started pouring. And I was like, of course, if Penn State's going to play in the Rose Bowl, if they're going to go to California, if they're going to get a break from Pennsylvania, it's going to be 40 degrees and pouring. And that's just what they're used to. Luckily for them, they practiced in the pouring rain almost the entire week, which I think mattered. When it comes to the end of the game and trying to close it out. And, of course, Utah scores that late touchdown. But when you want to close out a game, you don't want to be the weather, the way it changed, you don't want that to be unexpected.
Exactly. We've seen the weather have an effect on a lot of these games, and especially for Penn State.
I was going to say that the main reason we started this podcast is our experience with Penn
How much
State
it
and bad
matters.
weather.
Yeah.
And again, they overcame it. They went past it, although there were some references toward the end of the game that they did not cover the spread.
Oh.
So that goes the other theme of this
Yeah.
podcast. But
Yeah.
It was that late touchdown.
It was that late touchdown. And speaking of some of the points, a lot of those were generated by the arm and talent of Sean Clifford, which, again, what a season he had. The legacy, I always thought this season he felt different to me, that there was this quiet confidence amongst
Agreed.
him and even James Franklin.
Agreed.
James was always kind of like, all right, everyone calm down. He's playing. Yes, Drew Allar's behind him, but this is our quarterback. Talk to me about his legacy.
Yeah, I think when you looked at 2021 and how many times Sean Clifford stood up there and said, we're the best team in the country, and then they continued to get humbled and humbled and humbled, and James Franklin was very steadfast all last year. Let's not get complacent. Let's remember that there are teams that we're trying to be just as good as, but are we there? There was a humbleness to Franklin and almost a overconfidence from Clifford, and we saw the way the season went. And so when he decided to come back for this year, in my mind, it was, what kind of legacy are you going to leave here? And it was immediate. He started his business, and I think that opened him up to a lot of different conversations that he wasn't having before in terms of NIL and being a leader and creating a legacy beyond his football career. He immediately took on this humble tone. He would make fun of himself, which we never heard before. And he really was just a lot more of a pleasure to be around. And I don't mean that he was, not a nice guy before, but it was hard to understand who he was. And this year he let us all in. He did multiple interviews outside of Penn State football. We got to see his personality a little bit more, how much he loves his teammates. I think his relationship with his brother Liam, a wide receiver on the team, also opened him up a little bit, softened him a bit, because we saw how much that meant to him. So I talk about emotion more than football first, because I think this was a great season for him in terms of how he's going to be remembered as a person, and then as a football player. He owns almost all the records that you possibly could. Of course, you're there for 6 years, you start for 4 years.
Right.
You're gonna start to own some things.
Yep.
But he won you the biggest game this season, the Rose Bowl. You can argue as Michigan or Ohio State, but really, you're a Rose Bowl champion. There's
Huge.
one other Penn State team that's a Rose Bowl champion, and of course, 1994-95 can't be rivaled.
And he played nearly a perfect game. I mean, there was virtually no mistake made.
He did that a number of times in his career where you were like, that's the best game we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And one of them was Auburn last year. You see him have these flashes of greatness, and now we're watching him. He's training. He's going to try and go in the NFL draft. Of course, Pro Day is going to be really important. If he gets a combine invite, that's going to be really important. But this is a guy who has a competitive spark. But it'll be interesting to see just if he can extend his career beyond Penn State, what that looks like, but also just the way he's going to be remembered because he came back this season and won them a Rose Bowl, largely due to his efforts. I think that's going to be huge for his legacy.
So put aside the Rose Bowl for just a second, and what moment stands out to you from this season where maybe you kind of knew, this season could be something special?
That's a good one. I think watching them lose Ohio State, honestly, there was such a fire. Of course, they were leading with 9 minutes to go in that game, and then one guy took over that entire game. And Penn State has a history, right, of beating themselves in those moments. Of course, they lose that game, but to not bounce back and continue to lose. It was the way they didn't stack losses this year, where I thought, this is different, because you saw them last year. They were so high, and then when they lose a game, they'd lose two,
And to that point, for me, it was the Minnesota game, because they go out to Ann Arbor.
I agree with you.
They lose that Michigan game, And then you think, oh boy, here we go again. Because
Yeah.
at the time we didn't really know what Minnesota was. We thought they were, decent, but they come into the whiteout, and Clifford has a good game in that game, and they bounce back and they cream Minnesota. And then
Right.
to your point, after that, yeah, they lost the Ohio State game, but they were much more competitive in that game than they were in the Michigan game. So they didn't seem to let the losses weigh on them.
Well, and you think about their history in a whiteout lately has not been great, and everyone
Right.
kind of slammed them. You have very little say over what networks want what games and when that can be, and they want the
Yep.
whiteout to be a night game.
Sure.
So therefore, it's got to be a night game. So when you think about Minnesota, they got a little bit of flack for scheduling them for the whiteout, but to right, like you're saying, in between losses, kind of bounce back and have a really, really solid win says a lot about the way this program is rebounding. And I think that mentality that Franklin has kind of drilled into everyone's head, right? 1-0, 1-0, Minnesota. Like, I mean, we've all seen the tweets.
Yep.
I think that matters, and it's finally starting to translate into the players he's bringing into the program, that you can think you're a great team, you can think you're a top 10 team. If you lose, you got to show them why you're still a top 10 team.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we haven't seen in the past couple of years.
Yeah, the bounce back is so important, and some of that bounce back even goes to the players who have stayed there the longest, the COVID era players.
Yeah.
That bounce back now to go out and win the Rose Bowl, this has to propel them forward, right?
You got to think so. I think I don't want to compare the two because they are very different, but I'm gonna sit here and do it anyways. When you think about the Iron Lions who came through and stayed with Bill O'Brien and went on, COVID was debilitating for everyone who was involved in it, right? In a similar sense where programs were grappling with who's coming, who's going, guys like Michael Parsons leaving a year early because the Big Ten wasn't going to play football, like, the whole thing. I think you see these guys like PJ Mustipher, Tig Brown, Sean Clifford, these 6-year guys, Jonathan Sutherland, who doesn't get enough credit, but, one of those guys. This was their way to kind of put the program back on the right foot. You think about how difficult the past couple of years have been, and just trying to find consistency. And these guys who are saying, look, we're going to stay, we're going to bring that consistency. I think you look at guys like Gary Gilliam, Jordan Hill, guys from our area who stayed through the Bill O'Brien, James Franklin transition after Joe Paterno. You got to think of these things kind of similarly in the sense that having consistent leaders helps you over difficult times, and I think we saw that. COVID was difficult.
And, we've seen James Franklin have success at Vanderbilt, where very few people have. And then this is his, I believe, fourth 11-win season at Penn State. So this has happened before. They had the down years, but now this is like saying, no, we were on the right trajectory. Then COVID happened. Now we're coming back. So when we look ahead, you look at some of the national pundits, they have Penn State in the top 10. Yes, it's way too early, but that's what we do.
Way too early.
So do they, though, have the pieces in place to make a significant run next season? And that doesn't necessarily mean a playoff team, especially with still only 4. But can they come back and have another 11-win season? Do they have those pieces in place, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't think you lose as much as you did maybe like last year coming into this year where you had 9 guys go in the NFL draft and it was like the entire defense, and you bring in a new defensive coordinator. If they can keep Manny Diaz throughout all this chaos, I think your defense is just as good. He's proven he can put anyone in it and they'll play fine.
It was unreal this year. I mean, the different formations they ran, the amount of guys they played.
It was like the second game of the season, and we actually sat there and counted. It was like 25 guys rotate, like significant snaps.
And that paid off then at the end of the season. Depth made a big difference, and the amount of pressure they got on the quarterback this year just seemed to be different.
And I think that's where you talk about like being agents of chaos and turning the ball over and all of that Diaz said he wanted to bring in. We didn't see it immediately, but we saw it within 4 or 5 weeks.
Take some of that buy-in, some of the game experience.
And the players, Brent Pry was beloved. Like, that's universal. I've never met a person who doesn't love Brent Pry. And so, is there hesitancy when a new guy comes in and he's Manny Diaz and he comes with kind of all this big bravado and whatever. No, the players loved him too. And it wasn't like, oh yeah, no, we love No, it was like, I'm going to fight for this man. I love him.
That's what you need, yeah.
You have that buy-in. So I think defense, fine. Like, they'll put guys in there. Abdul Carter's a freak. Number 11, whoever wears it, they're a freak.
Guy is unreal.
So I think you have plenty of pieces there. Of course, the biggest question mark, you lose your 6-year quarterback, 4-year starter, Sean Clifford. Luckily for everyone, they begged, they pleaded, they got Drew Aller in the game a number of times. He showed enough. He's very different than Sean, which I think is going to be the biggest hurdle for them. And then I think you got to have production from the other guys. Your running backs are amazing. We're no longer talking about a run game problem, which is amazing.
That's nice. It's nice to have that setup going in.
We're talking about a wide receiver. I don't want to say problem. That's too dramatic. But we're talking about who is that guy? Who's going to step up?
The turnover, right.
The turnover. And
but you do get some of the O-line back.
And jury's out. Jury's out on whether or not they fix the O-line or not. But they're going to have to, because Sean's ability to get out of the pocket and make things happen is not Drew's ability right now. He's not as mobile. And so you're going to need to create a pocket and protect him. And that's going to fall on your O-line, and then it's going to fall on your receivers to find those routes, find that separation. I don't want to be pessimistic about it, because I think there's so much talent, and now you have a 1-2 punch. You have Katron and Nick Singleton, who obviously create issues for any defense with their explosiveness. I've watched Nick try and do some passing drills. It could be interesting.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
They're talented. Yeah. They're talented.
I mean, and can they use the tight end room, which they laud and celebrate, to help offset some of the issues there?
You brought up, though, a point, and Dan, I want you to follow this, because we just got news this week about the wide receivers and the wide receivers coach.
Yeah, so, looking forward, now they're looking for a new wide receivers coach. That person could be in-house. It could come from the outside. But at the same time, we're bringing in talent, Dante Cephas. I mean, that's exciting, a Pennsylvania guy.
Put all of that together for us, though. Why do you think Franklin felt the need to let him go?
Yeah, so Taylor Stubblefield, great coach, Hall of Fame, college football Hall of Famer, awesome guy. We've talked to him a number of times. I talked to him at the Rose Bowl, and he's a super positive person. I think what concerns me more than the position coach part of this is that he was the head of their offensive recruiting efforts, which is just like a consistency thing. He was in all the visits for almost any big player. You can see the pictures all over social media of any big player that they were going after. He's a young guy. He relates well to the players. But I think you think about the guys that he's developed. You have Jahan Dotson, of course, a first-round wide receiver out of Penn State's relatively unheard of. He inherited him. He inherited some of these guys. And so I think we saw it with Kirk Soraka. I don't know if he was as problematic as his firing may have seemed. But sometimes you need a new face. They've clearly decided that Yursich is their guy as offensive coordinator. So there's not a whole lot of other people on there that are big pieces that you can adjust and fill in. So I got to believe it's outside. If you're already getting success in the transfer portal, success in those kind of things, it makes it sound like you have a plan in place. It's not up in the air. I haven't heard anything. I would break news if I could, but I haven't.
You haven't talked to Bobby Ingram?
I'm speed dial. But I think there's a lot of talented position coaches across college football, and sometimes it's, hey, this guy's great, Stubbs is great, but we need to filter in someone else.
And you don't know. These coaching circles, you don't know who knows who, because when Brent Pry left, all of a sudden here comes Manny Diaz,
and it was quick.
And it was quick.
Yes.
And so these things, it may be a name and it may be somebody in house. We don't know, but like you said, probably tend to think they have a plan that maybe it's somebody outside wanting to come in and shake things up a little bit. The only thing I would hope
is it's someone young, and it's not like an ageist thing or anything like that, but they have so much experienced. Terry Smith, Anthony Poindexter, even Manny to a certain level. These guys, and of course I just named 3 defensive guys, but the coaching staff is relatively experienced, so you kind of need some young talent to get in there and just say, hey, I was in college 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and you can do that with a wide
somebody that's on TikTok.
It does help.
It is true.
I am joking, but not joking, right?
Especially when you want that relatability. In college football today, you need a guy who can look at people in the eye and say, hey, man, let's level as friends as much as I'm an authority figure.
Well, and I think what I like so far, too, is I was a little nervous when the news came out that maybe something was happening behind the scenes. Maybe he was in trouble. We're seeing it now with Michigan. Now multiple investigations going on. But could that actually end up helping Penn State, this consistency, this success with honor?
Yeah.
The season could come down to 2 games. That's, I guess, the biggest question we want to leave you with. What do they do in those 2 big games next year, Michigan, Ohio State?
Well, luckily there's some transition at Ohio State. C.J. Stroud finally declaring for the draft.
Last-minute decision there.
I know, really
we never saw that coming.
Yeah, no. Really unexpected, of course. But no, it's kind of like the Aaron Rodgers thing, where it's just make a decision,
Right.
But anyways, college football. So that could help a little bit, new blood in some of these programs. I think Michigan's your toughest
I agree
game
with
of
you.
the schedule because you played Ohio State so tough. And really, a couple bad decisions by Penn State in that game, and you fix some things. You watch Sean Clifford, just costly passes
Right.
and things like that. So that game was within your control. Michigan wasn't. And so as long as they have a run game that's that successful, as long as they have consistency at quarterback, I don't know how you beat them right now. Your defense will play them just as tough, but they put up 40 something, whatever. So
You get them at home, though, at least. That's
Well,
the good thing
And,
next
and-
year.
and we've talked
For
about
sure.
this too. Sometimes in those games too, one mistake compounds another,
Yes.
and it just gets steamrolled. I
Yes.
mean, they were leading at the half, Penn State.
But if you want to be that elite type of program, you've got to find a way to at least win one of those two games.
And I think you have a better shot at Ohio State. The reason why I worry about Michigan, like you're saying, one mistake leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. Your average age of your team is dropping by like 2 years
Yes.
next year. You have your running backs who are sophomores, Drew Aller, who's a sophomore. The core of your offense is going to be sophomores. Couple juniors, your tight ends are all leaving. So, I think your average age is dropping, which those are where your mental mistakes come from. If Sean Clifford and all of them are able to make those mistakes as 6-year, 24-year-old guys, what's a 19-year-old going to do
Right.
against Michigan in Beaver Stadium, which sometimes can turn against you? Like, I love Penn State fans, but one mistake, two mistakes, that third mistake, the fans are against you in that moment. So who are we yelling for next? Like, it used to be the chance about Drew Aller. Is it chance for Bo Prabula?
Now,
That's a great question.
Throwing that out there.
Last question for you before we quickly let you go here. But I want to ask you to make a prediction. Now, maybe we'll have you back on before the season. But what's the one thing you're looking forward to seeing the most next year?
Definitely Drew's progression. This is the first time Mike Yursich is going to have to develop a quarterback in this program. He inherited Sean Clifford as well. Their relationship grew. Can Drew turn into what he was supposed to? Can
Right.
he live up to what the expectations people have put on him? I think he's a really talented kid, but he's a kid, and so how can you shoulder the weight of that program, because they're going to expect you to. I'm going to throw in another one. How do they handle the transfer portal this offseason? Because I think we don't talk enough about how much of an impact that has, but some of the best guys on this team this past year came from the transfer portal.
Great
so
point.
you've got to find that next Adisa Isaac. You got to find the next
Chop
Mitchell
Robinson.
Tinsley.
Man, what a find.
Chop Robinson, yeah.
You got to find those guys, develop them in-house, get them to buy into your system, because you need to import leaders. You don't have very many left. They're all leaving. So you got to find leaders, find guys who can adapt into your program quickly. So I almost think those are two things. Can Drew develop, and can they find leaders to come in? Because right now they're so young.
Love it. And now you got to come back like in July.
Yeah.
We'll talk
when
about
we're
this all
seeing
again.
them.
When we're seeing them, and then you give us a big prediction for the season.
And maybe there will be a depth chart. I know Penn State doesn't believe in those.
There
Releasing
won't be.
those
I
to the
doubt
public.
it.
Yeah.
We'll have to come up with our own.
We think we know who QB1 is, though. Allie Berube, Sports Director here at ABC 27. Thank you so much.
All right, and welcome back. So since we recorded this is the funny part
And it
about
was just yesterday.
the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Penn State has received, by reports, another transfer wide receiver. This one is Malik McLean from Florida State. So a reputable program.
Four-star guy, I believe.
Former four-star recruit. It just adds another wide receiver to that room. Now, let me list to you some of the more notable names coming back for next year. Malik McLean, Dante Cephas, Keandre Lambert-Smith, and Harrison Wallace, plus a bunch of young guys farther down the depth chart.
Yeah, and, like we talked about, those aren't the only names. Now, that's the wide receiving core, and Franklin now searching for a new wide receiving coach. But you got Storm Duck from the transfer portal, too. You've got Curtis Jacobs coming back. You've got,
Adisa Isaac coming back.
Adisa Isaac, who, again, is he's a beast in there. And then you've got your O-line guys. And, listen, I thought Allie Berube brought up some great points about how let's slow down here. We want to make sure that Aller is, who we think he is. Not every five-star pans out. I'm saying, though, if that happens and he is the quarterback that everybody thinks that he is, there is no reason to think that this team is going to be limited.
No, I think the ceiling is unlimited. I think it would put us on par with the Ohio States of the world. And
Yep, you need a quarterback, number one.
let me just say something that should be quite obvious after watching the playoff game. TCU, who clearly did not have a phenomenal defense based on what Georgia did to them, they picked apart J.J. McCarthy. Michigan is beatable if J.J. McCarthy's behind center. I want to remind people of that.
Yes, they are. And again, Penn State needs to get more physical in the offseason.
Correct.
I think Franklin knows that. All right, let's go back now and review. We thank Allie for her time. It was a great interview, sports director here at ABC 27. Now, last week, it doesn't get much better. I mean, we keep getting worse. And, again, 1-5, 2-4, not great. So the under flopped for me in the 49ers game. I really thought. Now, by the way, let's be fair. As you said, we did call the weather was horrible.
The weather was horrible. It was on and off rain. And on top of that, the first half would have led you to believe that 42.5 was good. It's just the floodgates opened up in the second half, which I don't think many people saw coming because the other games that they played were close.
So good job to you on that pick. That was one of the ones you got right. Now, by the way, the Jaguars, we did get right, Dan. I don't know why you marked us wrong there. So they won that game.
Well, I'm not. Maybe it was the spread I was concerned about.
No, that they won. If you win, you get the spread. Yep. So we're good.
They won. So
we need to adjust those, by the way. So now
we'll fix that.
We'll fix that. So that is one we did get right. And speaking of that, if you watch the first half of that game, you may not. Maybe that's what you were thinking of.
Well, and the thing was too. I mean. You couldn't play any better than the Chargers did in the first half. You couldn't play any worse than the Chargers did in the second half. And you never want to leave Doug Peterson an opening. And they certainly did. I mean, it became a very laid-back, laissez-faire approach in the second half, and that credit to the Jags. They held in there and they chipped away.
Bring us back up on camera for a second, because I wanted to ask you, there was a lot of criticism about that game from the booth. Al Michaels and Tony Dungy, and Twitter was not happy. They didn't think that they had the right amount of excitement for such an amazing comeback. I don't know if you listened to the game. Did you have any criticism, or did you think, I
thought it was fine. I'm not really sure, Awful Announcing is a Twitter account, and they were all over this. For me, and maybe it's the angle of the booth, I wasn't sure that field goal was good at the end.
Yeah, but it wasn't just that. I think they just felt like it lacked energy all over. And keep in mind,
the game was a blowout for the majority of the game. So,
right.
You go from that to the next extreme where it's getting closer, and it is still just a wild card game, folks. It's not like we're playing the Super Bowl.
Well, and I said, too, Al Michaels is a legend, so he gets an immediate amount of slack.
And he's how old?
He's 78.
Right. So, it's
he's
not
old,
like...
But listen,
it was
first
a long
of all,
game. That took a while to get to that point.
I like Tony Dungy, but he's low energy.
Yeah, he always has been.
And you are pairing two guys together that haven't really worked together before. You can't just show up and expect two people that have never worked together to have instant chemistry. That's not how it works. And also, there's one man that Al Michaels wants to work with.
That's right.
And it's Chris Collinsworth, and that's not happening.
And it's not happening, and Chris Collinsworth is a whole other bowl of wax, which I'm not.
Some people don't like him either.
I am not a big fan.
But I really do think that while Al did maybe lack some energy, that, again, the call was fine, and maybe he does need a different partner. When you have somebody in the booth that doesn't get excitable, you may need to. Right. But it's also Al's job as the veteran to kind of elevate Tony Dungy, I think.
Correct. And, again, I still think you go back to how the game played out, and it was so boring for so long.
Yes.
That it took until the wee end to become interesting. And by the way, I'm not a big Brandon Staley fan. I'm glad the Eagles did not hire him, and quite frankly, it kind of showed up. To me, if Justin Herbert is this all-pro, whip-lashing, tongue-lashing quarterback, I didn't see it.
Well, and again, I've said this too, and that people will criticize me for this, but Al is a star, and he's called a lot of games, and folks, like it or not, the Chargers and the Jaguars, it's not the Patriots and the Steelers.
No.
And I don't care. You can watch any NFL game, and when you get into the playoffs, every game matters, but branding still counts. And I'm sorry.
100%. It wasn't the marquee
Chargers
matchup.
And the Jaguars are not big brands.
Correct.
Sorry.
And the Chargers showed up as they normally do as teams that blow it.
Somebody, I wrote that on Twitter, and somebody said, well, but Al's paid a lot of money to make you feel like it's a big game. And that is true. That is true. But at the end of the day, listen, the Chargers and Jaguars, you can only get so excited for.
Well,
sorry.
And you always have to wonder with Al, what kind of money did he have riding on the game?
Well,
we talk about wagers here.
No, and I'm thinking that maybe he like the Chargers, and all of a sudden that game slipped away pretty quick.
Correct, and that could be the case, and maybe there was some in-game movement too. You just never know.
You never know. But so I just wanted your opinion on that. So we do have to make that correction because there's a pie in the face on the line here.
I agree, but it ain't going to help us very much.
No, it's not. Bills money line, I had that one right. They did not cover the 9 points. Good pick with the Giants. We know they showed up. It was still a one-score game, though. We're going to get into more about the Giants. Now, we to be fair, we've done this all year. We both could have taken credit for the Ravens-Bengals score.
It was a 7-point game.
It was a push, but we're not going to do that. It has to be at least a hook over, and it wasn't, so we're both wrong. And then the Buccaneers, listen, real quick on that.
I'm shocked.
I'm not as shocked. I've been saying I think the Cowboys are a good team, and we knew the Buccaneers had problems, but, I mean, it was a blowout.
But, we say it in college, it's a week-to-week sport. You want to talk about some major changes from week to week. All of a sudden, Dallas woke up, and the Buccaneers did not. It just surprises me with so much on the line. These guys are playing for their careers, their lives. I mean, the Bucs didn't belong on the field.
They really didn't. Let's bring in Mr. Shiner now as we ask the question that everybody wants to know. Is Tom Brady going to come back, or is he going to be – there was some talk. Maybe he shows up on the Fox coverage of the Super Bowl. What do you think he's going to be doing?
I sure hope we don't have Tom Brady calling some games here. But
No. It wouldn't, I don't think it would be in the booth, but I mean,
more
like in the
like
pregame, maybe him and Terry Bradshaw.
I still stand by my statement. I don't need any more Tom Brady than I've already gotten.
Don't you though? I mean, he's a legend, Shiner.
I see the appeal. It just doesn't work for me. I've always thought Tom was sort of kind of like a standoffish guy in his
Patriots days?
Well, just in general, anytime he's on screen, I think he's very vanilla sometimes. The thing that I think is the most crazy stat of this whole season is Tom Brady at, what is he now? He's
58. No, he's 45.
45 years old.
Yeah.
I believe broke the NFL record for most pass attempts ever.
And I also believe...
Why is a 45-year-old doing that?
Yeah,
because he's
and
their
it
only
makes
chance
them
to win
so
it.
one-dimensional,
Wasn't this
too,
the
and I
first-
think that played into how they lost the game.
Yeah.
Wasn't this the first interception that he threw in a playoff game? Didn't I read
I believe
that somewhere?
so, yeah.
Hey, I'm not sure
Maybe
about
in the
that. I
red
stopped
zone
watching.
in a playoff game.
There was some
Still,
stat
yeah.
like that. The guy is amazing, so I respect him for that. Now, listen.
Oh, yeah, respect is there.
Well, and that's fair.
You know.
But it just yes or no. Is he going to play next season? Your opinion, your thought.
I believe he will be a Las Vegas Raider.
Me too.
You think he's going to go out there with
One-year
Josh
deal.
McDaniels?
1 year deal.
Why not?
See if he
How
can still
about-
throw it around.
But see, here's the thing. And he's smart enough to do this. Like when he went to Tampa, he demanded a team around him.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And you're going to have to do the same thing in Oakland because that remains a reclamation
Vegas.
project. Or you're correct, Vegas. I can't get it
It's
right.
hard
No,
to forget.
no.
It's
But,
hard to forget.
but I will say, again, the type of cachet that Tom Brady brings to an organization, it is worth it for the Raiders to do it.
Well, yeah.
especially in Vegas where it isn't a home team kind of
Correct.
atmosphere. You have a lot of transients or people on vacation going to those games.
There is
I feel a lot of
another-
people would love to come to see Brady play.
There is another landing spot he could go to. New England.
No, not happening.
I thought you were going to go there.
Not happening.
I've heard it could happen.
Bill Belichick will never eat the crow to bring Tom Brady back.
But, maybe...
He'd be wise to.
I'm not saying it's not a good move. I just don't think. I think Bill's hubris is too strong for him to be like, oh, you know what? I screwed up. I let you go. You won. Come on back. Let's see if we can roll it back one more time.
Maybe it's one of those one-day deals.
Maybe.
A Patriot for
To
a day
retire
to
his
retire.
jersey, maybe.
Right.
That's
That may
it.
be, yeah. Well, it's going to be fascinating to
Be interesting to see.
Real quick, too, before we move on to this week's games, not a lot out of the coaching carousel, but Sean Payton, he's the hottest name out there right now.
Why?
He did interview. I'm kind of with you on that, but he did interview with the Texans. They listen. I mean, the Texans couldn't get any worse. So, but I will say that there's a guy too. Was he a good coach because he had Drew Brees?
I believe so.
Or is he going to come out and instantly improve whatever organization he lands at? I mean, it wouldn't be hard to improve the Texans. I'm just being fair.
Well, it all depends on the GM. To me, you need a GM that's strong, that can build a roster and build it within the constraints of the cap. I mean, that's what it comes down to. That's why, unfortunately, love him or hate him, Howie Roseman is successful. He plays the game.
Well, he does, and I don't know if Sean Payton will land
Now,
anywhere, but he certainly could.
There was some news just before we came on here, and the OC for Tampa has been
Yes.
let go.
Right.
Brian Leftwich.
Yep.
So
and
there's an opening.
One of the names that they are looking at is Todd Monken from Georgia.
Which would be interesting. That'd be an interesting move. Any other final thoughts on the coaching carousel, boys?
The only thing I think is kind of interesting about the Peyton aspect of this all is I believe the Saints still own the rights to him. So
Yes,
you're
it's a
talking
trade.
about a trade, not just signing someone as your coach. So that plays into how that affects your organization moving forward, taking away draft capital. I think it has to be a special spot to take that on.
Rumored to be a first-round pick.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
That's a little steep. That's a little steep. Maybe a fifth-rounder for Sean. I'd give up a fifth-rounder for Sean Payton.
Yeah, but again, he is a proven coach to an extent, and you can argue that, but whether or not it had something to do with Drew Brees, you're going to find out very quickly. But maybe the guy just needs a good quarterback.
And is Sean McVay a product of Matthew Stafford?
We'll see, because he certainly, if things fell apart. I wonder if he regrets not taking the TV money there.
I think he regrets a lot at this point.
Yeah, so we'll see. It is time, though. We want to get moving, and we've got games to pick.
Games of the week.
Should mention, though, Dan, the overall record. We have to adjust that by one. But
We'll fix it.
Can you just show that again, because we aren't doing well at all. It is tough to pick games.
Relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking, but again, you've got a 3-game edge on me now.
3-game edge. Still a lot to go yet, though, my friend, and there could be surprises this weekend.
Somebody walked through the newsroom when you were previewing this yesterday and said, why should we listen to you? And I'm not saying you should listen to me. I'm saying we give the weather, we make picks, and we're about as good as anybody else.
Yeah, and before we get into those matchups, let's talk about the weather.
Yeah.
Because we do have some activity here leading into the weekend, and it's the same old story we've been talking about, a very active pattern across the country. Now, this time, it leads into what could be a little bit of a snowy Saturday lake effect snow in the Northeast, which, again, just always something to keep in mind. As
Buffalo is hosting a game.
Yep, the Bills are around, so we gotta watch that. But at the same time, coming out of the south, this developing storm, which we still don't know all the details yet about.
No, because it hasn't formed yet. So oftentimes when the models are picking up on these things, they're going to get a lot better as the storm actually develops. But this would be almost a coastal storm developing. And the issue for us here in Pennsylvania, is it going to snow? Is it going to rain?
Right.
I think it could snow a little bit and then change to rain. The pattern still doesn't favor a good old-fashioned snowstorm here.
Correct. But again, to keep in mind, if you have any travel plans, if you are out and about late Saturday into Sunday, we will be seeing moisture moving into the Mid-Atlantic, whether it is of the wintry variety or rain. It is something we are following very closely, and that does lead us into our games of the week, because we have some Saturday and Sunday matchups this week. First, the Jags and the Chiefs will have some of the moisture initially.
I was going to
from
ask
this
that.
storm.
We think that that's going to affect this game on Saturday, at least some light showers. They're going to be on the northern edge of this, but I think that they could be affected. They're a 9-point favorite against those Jaguars.
Yeah, they are, and the Jags may be playing in a little bit of snow. There is some snow potential there in KC, light snow.
Yeah, interesting.
But the Eagles, though, on the eastern side of that, avoided it.
They avoided on Saturday night, and we're going to have the forecast. They're a 7.5-point favorite. So 2 more than a touchdown spreads on Saturday, by the way.
Correct.
Sunday, again, maybe some flurries and snow showers in Buffalo. That is usually the case this time of year. These games are tighter now with the spreads, both Sunday games.
And it makes sense. I mean, these are very good matchups for both games. And I will say this much. There is a lot riding behind the scenes on this Bengals-Bills game. I mean, let's just face it. The last time they played, what happened?
Yeah, you're right. It was the DeMar Hamlin incident, and luckily he is okay. Really a miracle. And
yes.
Now they come back a few weeks later, ready to go in the playoffs. I want to comment, though, on this Cowboys-49ers game.
This is
for a
the
second.
game of the weekend, I think.
We're going to give the weather, and then we'll give our picks. But here's what I'm asking. Let's say that the Eagles get by the Giants. Now, I don't think it's going to be easy. I do think we're better than the Vikings, though. How important is it that the Cowboys have to go to San Francisco, and those two teams have to slug it out before they maybe then have to come to Philly? I think it sets up nicely for the Eagles.
I do, too, and that's why home field advantage is so critical. The road comes through Philly.
Yep, it has to, but just the fact that this is going to be a physical game.
It's going to be a physical game, and again, that's where the bye week, the Eagles have had a week of rest, so they've had one less game than everybody, and as you mentioned, the physicality part of this. I mean, the Cowboys didn't have to play that physical against the Bucs, but nonetheless, they had to play all their starters. It was at least a 3-quarter game. Now they go out, probably play a 4-quarter slugfest
Yep.
in Santa Clara.
That's what I mean. And so it's taxing.
It is taxing.
Plus, the Eagles get an extra day to rest.
And is Brock Purdy for real? Is
We're gonna
Dak
find
Prescott
out.
for real? Because he looked like the guy again.
How about the weather? Is that for real? Let's go.
Yep, let's go.
Kansas
Let's
City,
talk
baby.
about it. 37 degrees. So, again, teetering on the edge. Have we talked about this much this winter? We're always on the edge of everything, it seems like. But a mix of light snow and rain likely during the game. Let's play this out here for you. During the day, Saturday, that snow develops to the west, rolls on through. Again, will it be sticking to the field? Hard to say based on temperatures.
Yeah, I don't think so, but they are going to be right on the edge. And, of course, this game is at 4:30.
Right.
Arrowhead going to be rocking, and they're going to have some precipitation and moisture right there with it.
And the wind shouldn't be a huge factor with this. But, again, the question to me is how much of that snow makes it onto the field. KC is a big speed team.
Yes, they are.
And so if there's poor traction, how does that slow down Patrick Mahomes and company?
Now, but listen, at the end of the day, they're taking on a Jaguars team that does have confidence.
They do have
And
confidence.
They're built in a similar way, though. How much speed do they have? And they rely on their quarterback very heavily, too.
And Mr. Travis Etienne, too. So, again, weather's the equalizer. We've been saying it all year.
Yeah.
It could really put the Jaguars on a more even playing field with the Chiefs.
Yeah. Now, Philly's going to have a pretty nice day Saturday, but, of course, Dan, this game is Saturday night.
Right. So it's going to be mild during the day. Let's play this out here for you. You could see temperatures for tailgating.
A few clouds.
It doesn't get much better for January in
No.
Philadelphia. So tailgating should be just fine.
We
Heading
clear
into
out.
the evening, it clears out.
Not bad.
Temperatures in the upper 30s come game time. Again,
Beautiful night for football.
Weather is not a factor in Philly. A little bit of wind, but again, not oppressively so. And Jake Elliott had some practice here in the last couple of weeks, so perhaps he's ready to go too.
I think this game probably is, again, weather-wise, one of the better ones. Now,
I do too.
Let's talk about Buffalo. And do we anticipate a few flurries? There probably could be.
Right, as long as the wind's blowing out of the northwest on the backside of the storm, let's play it out. We
there
do
it
have
is.
areas of snow
Boom.
showers developing. There's a trough coming through. Certainly could be some snow, whether it's accumulating. Again, hard to say at this point, but throughout the game,
It's going to be there.
it's going to be there. It's going to be a factor of some type. Now, again, is it light? Is it heavy? Hard to say at this point, but notice where the winds are blowing. Initially out of the east, but they will begin to switch to more of a westerly direction as the game goes on, which should enhance a little bit of that snow.
Yeah, and that could be. Listen, I just want a good snow game. I mean,
It's
that's gonna
fun
be,
to watch
It's
in
fun
January.
to watch in January. That's what you want, and then you head out to a place I don't ever need to go to, but Santa Clara, California. Yeah, we know that the college football championship game was out there, and it was rather bleak. Not this year, but a couple of years ago. This is a game that the 49ers, I'm sure they're glad to be hosting rather than going to Jerry World. But will it matter? I mean, the weather should be okay.
Weather should be okay. For once, they're not getting hit with another storm coming in from the Pacific. So, again, weather should not be a factor. Winds may pick up during the day.
Interesting.
But again, this pattern has
look
been,
at that.
kind of been kicking up a fuss
Yes.
every once in a while across the West Coast.
So that of all four games, that may be the windiest or the breeziest.
And by the way, Dallas doesn't have a kicker currently that can make an extra point.
Apparently. So
Maybe
that,
the wind could help.
That could help. It is time for those picks, and we're both going to go Chiefs -9. That is the favorite as of this Thursday. We're recording this on Thursday morning. The Chiefs, again, listen, love the Jags, love Doug Peterson. Just think they have more weapons, and, Andy Reid has been in this situation so many times.
And, who did Doug Peterson learn from? Andy
The
Reid.
master.
And, Doug Peterson's will to win can work against the Brandon Staleys of the world, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
When you take on Andy Reid, he's anticipating some of those quirks, some of those wrinkles.
Yeah.
Did you love that set for a QB sneak that Doug Peterson threw out there? He did the T formation.
Yes. Looked a little Penn State-ish, actually.
They stole. Shiner, you want to chime in on that?
It was just that's been all over the internet. You look at it; they got the three backs in the backfield. It was like, a little.
And then just scoot Etienne
Just
out to the
scoot it
edge.
out. Like, where have I seen that?
So, just some interesting wrinkles there that I don't think will fool Mr. Andy Reid. So.
No, I think so. And at home, again, the weather may equalize things, but I think they pull away in the end.
I do too.
We both are on the -9, so I'm not going to gain any points on you there. Now, this is an interesting one. You and all of your hot talk about how great the Eagles are and how awful the Giants are, you don't have the stones to actually pick the Eagles to cover here.
Well,
and I'd like to know why.
The only reason I say this is because of the smoke around Jalen. it seems to have calmed down a little bit, but they kept on hyping how bad the injury was. The question to me is he 100%? Will he be running the RPO stuff? Our good friend George Richards listening in intently.
He is. Yeah, we're getting to those Cowboys.
I truly think the Eagles are going to win, but my question is, do the Giants keep it close enough, and is Jalen hampered enough that they don't cover?
Well, fair questions, and I have long said I think the Giants and the Cowboys are better than you want to give them credit for. But I will say this: I think the Eagles are hungry for this. I think the fact that it is a divisional foe has them. They're going to pull out all the stops here too.
I certainly hope so.
I kind of want to say humiliate the Giants. And watching that game last week, and everybody talked about Brian Daboll, and I think he's a great coach, and the Giants look good. And listen, they did, but the Vikings defense had a lot of issues.
Atrocious.
And they could not contain Daniel Jones. If the Eagles defense can't contain Daniel Jones, then we don't deserve to win, because I think that is going to be, I mean, there's no way he's going to get that loose.
Daniel Jones meet Hassan Riddick. That's all I got to say.
I mean, it's just not going to happen. So, and at the end of the day, as good as the Giants played, that was still, it's not like it was 31-10. That was a one-score game.
Well, and A.J. Brown was quoted this week, too, of saying, get ready for the track show. Get ready for some excitement. So I think these guys, this is almost a challenge now, which is what you want to see coming into a playoff game.
You run your mouth, and then when push comes to shove, you're got to take the easy way out.
I'm not taking the easy way out because, again, the factor here is Jalen. If they don't have the RPO game, it's going to limit the offense.
You're trying to be smart, and by the way, it's worked. I mean, you're ahead in our standing, so good for you. And I
got to maintain that lead. I want to be a front runner.
I certainly can't run my mouth, although I will try. Bengals, Bills. Now, this is an interesting one. We do differ here.
We're kind of saying the same thing.
Well, yes and no, because even if the Bengals win, I'm going to get credit for that at plus 5.5. All they need to do is cover that. You absolutely think the Bills are going to win. What's the X factor to you then?
I think the X factor is the background. I think to me, there's no way the Bills lose this game based on the emotion, based on all the background coming in about DeMar Hamlin. And truly, you can't play any worse than the Bills did last week. I mean, that has to be their low point of the season.
I'm telling you, and I've said this before, that's why I only picked them to win last week. I didn't pick them to cover. As good as they are, they get in these tight situations, and they almost seem to play that way. They're playing nervous, playing like they were the team that was supposed to go to the Super Bowl. I wonder if that pressure has gotten to them.
Well, you do. It's fair to wonder, because initially in that Miami game last week, it seemed like they were going to pull away, and then turnover, brought them back into the game.
Sloppy.
And that can happen to any team. That could happen to the Eagles here.
Yeah, well, right.
And so, again, if the ball bounces the wrong way, which it may in a hotly contested game like this one, I think it's going to be close.
And we talked about this too. Joe Burrow. I mean, he's been in this position before. It's hard to pick against him. So you're going to pick the Bills, and I'm going to pick the Bengals to at least cover. But if they win outright, I think it's a possibility, and I'll get the points there. Now, this game, the final game of the weekend.
This is the most talked about one.
I am going to go with the George Richards Cowboys, and I'm going to pick them to cover. And again, if they win, I still get credit for that. I'm telling you, how about an Eagles-Cowboys NFC title game?
It would be something. It would. I mean, you want to see Philly lit up like a Christmas tree. That's the way to do it.
And you want to see Fox lit up like a Christmas tree, because the ratings would be.
Oh man, it would be the event of the year. It might be higher than the Super Bowl.
Probably not, but it'll be close. I think it would be very close. I just think the Cowboys are a really good team, and I think that sometimes you write them off too quickly. They have a lot of talent there, especially defensively, and the 49ers. Again, they have to put it all together, I think, to beat this Cowboys team. Now, lay into them. Go ahead, because you're chomping. I could see it.
Well, I never thought I would say this, because I'm not a Kyle Shanahan fan, but I will take Kyle Shanahan over Mike McCarthy. And I think.
Well, now, hold on a second. I would too.
Yeah.
But I like Dallas's team better, and I don't really trust Mike McCarthy. I'm going to agree with you on that. But I do like Micah Parsons. I do like Dak. I like the running backs of Dallas. And I question, can Brock Purdy get it done?
Well, he's the hottest commodity right now. He was Mr. Irrelevant. Now he's the hottest commodity. The most talked about guy on talk radio right now is Brock Purdy. And they're rolling. I mean, it's what I've talked about before, and this goes back to my theory. It's all about when you get hot. The 49ers are hot right now. And to me, I think it sets up, and a lot of the people I listen to that follow the Eagles.
Is Mike McCarthy hot?
No, he's not. He's not. He's just not. And here's another factor, too, that we have to point out. Dan Quinn is actively interviewing for jobs, the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys. And I think
Is that right?
I think Adam Schefter was tweeting about Adam Schefter, of course, the NFL expert for ESPN, was tweeting about Dan Quinn's loaded interview schedule leading up to this game.
That is a very, very interesting point.
And the defense had struggled at points this season. So I'm just saying, this one could get away from
them. That does tend to affect a locker room. Mm-hmm. Don't you want to be here? What's going on? I'm just saying, that's a great point. That is a great point.
I think
Plus, they have to travel out there.
Right. I think Brock Purdy continues on his little run of dominance here. And I think, as I've thought since the beginning of the playoffs, it sets up a Philly 49ers NFC Championship game, which would be a lot of fun.
Either way, I hope the Eagles are there, and I hope it's a lot of fun. It is time now for
Final Picks.
And we are heading into divisional weekend, picking the 4 games, and what a fun 4 games they are. We agree on the Chiefs. We basically agree on the Eagles, although I'm going to take them to cover. I'm going to take the Bengals to cover.
Very interesting, and I will take the Bills to win outright.
And then we differ on that big final game. Cowboys +4, 49ers -4. Good luck, my friend, because I think that could be a good one.
I think it's going to be a very good one, and I think that could be the tipping point of our picks.
I think so, too. It all comes down to this. We're going to know before the Super Bowl who's getting that pie, it looks like.
I think so. So there it is in the larger version, so everyone can see the picks.
Yep. Fair is fair.
And so we're basically down to 3 games after this. So we're down to the AFC Championship game, we're down to the NFC Championship game, and the Super Bowl, which will determine the final outcome.
Put up our picks, our email and social, because you need to start telling us what kind of pie we need to have here for the podcast, because that is coming up in a few weeks. You can find us there on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and, of course, send us an email, weatherwagers@gmail.com. We are here for you. That's it for me. And Dan, enjoy the divisional playoff weekend.
I think it's going to be a great weekend of football, everybody. Take care, enjoy, and go Birds!
Go Birds!